I started at that company when I was just a man with nothing but loyalty and two hands that knew how to work. Back then, I was 32, still had a full head of hair, and believed that if I just did good work, sooner or later people would notice. The first day I walked into that office, I wore a white shirt, still smelling fresh from the soap, with just a pen and a small notebook in my pocket. Nobody greeted me. Nobody cared what my name was. But I didn't mind because I believed hard work eventually gets you remembered. I stayed with that place for 17 years. 17 years without a single long summer vacation. 17 years of never being late. 17 years where I was always the last one to leave the office, except for one person, Mike Dawson. Mike wasn't the talkative type, but between us, there was this comfortable silence. Many late nights, when the office was filled only with the buzzing fluorescent lights and the steady hum of the AC, Mike and I would sit across from each other, each with a cold cup of coffee, sharing little bits of everyday life, stories about his son learning to drive, about my wife taking up baking, about the blueprints I stayed up all night finishing to get to the boss on time. We were the kind of guys who never fought for credit. Whenever a project succeeded, my name was never mentioned. I didn't blame anyone. I always thought, God knows. As long as God sees, that's enough. I used to think that if I just kept trying, if I did a little more, stayed a little later, helped one more colleague stuck on a deadline, then one day they would see. One day, I'd be invited up on stage, shake the boss's hand to the sound of applause from the whole room, and they'd call me by my full name, Daniel Carter, the man who made this project a success. But 17 years went by, and that name only ever appeared in one place: the work assignment roster. I wasn't good at speeches, not quick on my feet in front of a crowd. I didn't know how to kiss up. All I knew was how to work. And I worked so much that some nights I came home, my back aching like it was broken, eyes stinging, but I'd still smile when I saw the lights on in the house, and my wife, Lisa, sitting there, going over the bills I was still managing to pay on time. I didn't blame anyone. Honestly, I held no resentment. Maybe it's because I was taught that a person's worth isn't measured by applause, but by what they do when no one is watching. I lived like that. I worked like that. I quietly fixed mistakes others missed, protected the company's reputation in situations nobody knew about, and I never asked for a word of praise. For me, the silence was a long prayer. Every blueprint finished on time, every project without errors, every time I chose to forgive in gratitude, I felt I was doing what God wanted. But then, one day, I started noticing the looks changing. The younger folks coming in, smooth talkers, dressed sharp, walking into meetings with colorful slides, confidently talking about optimizing efficiency strategies, while I was still holding a pencil and ruler, adjusting details on a blueprint. I didn't feel jealous. I just started to feel out of place. Mike was still there, still working diligently like me, but sometimes when he looked at me over his coffee cup, I saw something in his eyes like a warning nobody dared to speak aloud. As if we were walking on a narrow path, and a bus named Restructuring was speeding up from behind. I told myself, just keep doing good work, Daniel. God sees. And when they choose who to keep, they won't overlook someone like you. I believed that, until the day the boss called me into his office, and the door closed behind me with a soft click, but cold like a verdict. The sixth-floor conference room had that blinding white light. Leather chairs around a long wooden table, glass doors opening onto a view of the parking lot below, where I always parked my old blue pickup truck, its tires worn thin by time. I walked in. The boss was already there, arms crossed. He didn't look at me right away, pretending to flip through documents. The air was silent, only the sound of the wall clock ticking away the seconds, each tick like a hammer against my eardrum, then against the trust I'd held onto for nearly 2 decades. I knew something was wrong. People don't call you in midday just to say thank you. The boss spoke in a steady tone, without a hint of hesitation, that the company was entering a phase of strong transformation, that they needed new blood, that thank you for your dedicated contributions over the past 17 years. But they wanted to try a different approach. I didn't react, just sat there silently, as if listening to the evening news. Not a single name was mentioned until he said, "Colin will be taking over your position starting next week." I knew Colin. Full name Colin Reyes. He'd been out of school less than a year, master's degree in construction management or something from a prestigious university the boss used to sponsor. From the day he walked into the company with shiny shoes and slicked back hair, I'd suspected changes were coming. Colin liked to talk about digitalization, data systematization, and terms that sometimes sounded like another language to me. He preferred PowerPoint slides, not technical drawings, like typing on a laptop instead of holding a measuring tape. When I stood up to leave the conference room, I saw Colin sitting in the reception area. The afternoon light slanted through the glass, falling on his beige suit. He smiled at me, a smile that was half polite, half arrogant. I wasn't sure if he knew I'd just been let go to make room for him, or if he knew very well. I walked past him without a word, but I noticed a small detail. His hands were clenched tight, knuckles white. People only clench their fists like that when they're trying to appear calm under great pressure. When I got back to my desk, Mike was already standing there. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, then gave a slight nod. We understood each other well enough not to need words. I gathered my things into a cardboard box. Family photo, a long steel ruler, a set of blueprints marked with red ink, details I'd corrected for the most recent project, the one that would surely have been rejected by the client if not for me. I used to think I'd stick with this place until retirement. I thought I'd retire with honor, not quietly like a worker whose time was up. On the way to the elevator, I passed the long corridor with plaques naming outstanding employees over the years. I saw Mike's picture from 5 years ago. Saw the name of someone who used to be my subordinate. Not my name, of course. My picture had never hung here. But strangely, I didn't feel bitter. Just empty. Mike caught up with me in the parking lot. The afternoon wind swept by, carrying the smell of dust and freshly laid asphalt. He leaned against my truck door, hands in his pockets, looking towards the building. "He's never even been on a construction site," Mike said. "The boss told me I have to teach Colin how to read foundation plans. He thought the colored lines were just for decoration." He gave a weak laugh. 17 years, Daniel. And all it took was a last name. I gripped the steering wheel tighter when I heard that. A last name, yes, that was it. Not because he was more talented, just because he was the boss's nephew. Mike didn't say more. He just placed a hand on my shoulder for a long moment, then nodded. I knew he wanted to say I didn't deserve this, but like me, he understood the rules of the game here. I drove out of the lot. In the rearview mirror, I saw Colin standing near the 6th floor window, looking down. It wasn't clear if he was watching me or just staring somewhere else. But that image stuck with me, a young man, standing in the office I used to call home, starting a journey laid out for him on a red carpet, not because he was good, but because he had the right bloodline. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the truck for another 15 minutes, listening to the clock ticking on the dashboard, the rustling of leaves in the yard. And in that moment, I felt like an ink stain crossed out on a page already full of erasure marks. Unseen, unremembered. Just me, God, and the silence of someone just erased from the story he once wrote with all his loyalty. That evening, I got home earlier than usual. The sun had set, but it wasn't completely dark yet. The small white house my wife and I had lived in for over 10 years sat quietly under the pale yellow streetlights. The sky wasn't rainy, but a thin layer of gray clouds veiled it lightly, as if heaven itself was hesitating, unsure whether to cry or stay silent. I opened the door, stepped inside, and was enveloped by a strange atmosphere. No sound of cooking from the kitchen. No smell of the toast Lisa usually made for our simple dinners. Just the low murmur of the TV in the living room, playing a news program no one was watching. Lisa sat there on the couch near the window. She wore the old gray sweater I'd given her last Christmas. Her hair was pulled back, her face bare of makeup, but her eyes, they weren't the eyes of the Lisa I knew. I sat down across from her, placing the cardboard box on the coffee table. The box with my things from the office, the steel ruler, a family photo frame, a notebook filled with handwriting, and a small worn badge I'd received 10 years ago for outstanding work performance. I told her about being fired. I didn't beat around the bush, just said it straight. No blaming, no complaining. I spoke in a level voice, trying to keep the tremor out of my words. She didn't ask anything for the first few minutes, just looked at me, but that look felt like someone placing a cold stone on my chest. After a silence that stretched on forever, she stood up, went to the kitchen, and came back with a stack of old bills. She put them down on the table right next to my box. I looked down. Electricity, water, the mortgage statement, credit card bills. All there, piled up like a silent slap in the face. "You promised you'd take care of us?" she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, each word sharpened like a knife. "You said that job was stable. You said promotions didn't matter, just security. So what now, Daniel?" I wanted to answer. I really did. But my throat felt dry as sand. I heard the second hand of the wall clock ticking its rhythm, feeling like time itself was trying to draw out this moment, to punish me longer. Lisa didn't wait for me to speak. She walked past me, towards the stairs. But before placing her hand on the railing, she stopped and said, very quietly, "From tomorrow, our daughter will go to after-school care. I'll pick up extra shifts. And you should find something. Soon." She didn't call me husband. She didn't ask, "What will we do?" She just said, our daughter, and you." The distance in her words was greater than the space between the ends of the couch where we used to sit close together every night watching old movies. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I wasn't kicked out, but I didn't dare enter the room either. I lay on the living room sofa with an old blanket, the springs creaking every time I shifted. The ceiling looked different from this angle. Higher, colder, more distant. I looked at the family photo on the shelf, me, Lisa, and our little girl, taken at the park one autumn years ago. In the photo, I was smiling. Lisa was smiling too. She leaned against my shoulder, and our daughter held a cotton candy bigger than her face. I couldn't remember exactly when we'd been that happy, or if we ever truly were, or if we just got used to playing the part of an orderly family. When the clock struck 11, I heard Lisa's footsteps on the floor above. Each step felt like it walked across my heart, reminding me that upstairs was the woman who once called me the man of her life, and now called me nothing at all. I thought about going up to talk, but then I remembered her eyes looking at the stack of bills, and I knew some distances can't be bridged with apologies. I lay there, eyes wide open in the darkness. Outside, the wind started to pick up, whistling softly through the roof. Maybe it would rain tomorrow. I wasn't sure what hurt more, being fired without warning, or coming home and no longer being welcomed. That night, I drifted in and out of sleep for a few minutes at a time. In a brief dream, I saw myself standing in the middle of the old office. Everyone's back turned to me. I called their names, but no one heard. Then I looked over at Lisa. She turned her back too, and when I tried to touch her shoulder, she crumbled into dust. I woke with a start. Dawn was just breaking. The first light filtered through the gap in the curtains, casting a faint, long streak on the floor. I sat up, rubbed my face. The room was still quiet. No smell of coffee, no sound of Lisa's footsteps like usual. I walked to the kitchen and found a note she'd left on the table. "Daughter's eating breakfast at school. I left early for work." That was it. No, "have a good day." No, "I'll be home early." Just cold notifications like a voicemail message. I stood there for a long time holding the piece of paper. Then I folded it carefully, as if folding a delicate silk scarf. I placed it next to the family photo, as if to remind myself that everything had changed, but still needed preserving, even if only the shell. That morning, I opened my laptop, typed the words, "skilled labor jobs, no degree," and inside, something broke very quietly. Not a sob, but the sound of someone starting to learn how to exist without being called husband. I used to think I wasn't the type to break easily. Not because I was strong, but because I was used to enduring. But every habit has its limit. And mine came on a Thursday evening, when I heard the landline ring 3 short times, then stop. I walked over, picked up the receiver, and heard a robotic voice from the bank. "Hello, Mr. Daniel Carter. Your mortgage payment is currently 3 months overdue. If we do not receive a response by the 15th, we will initiate foreclosure proceedings." I put the receiver down, my hand still trembling slightly, as if that soulless voice hadn't just delivered bad news, but had also taken something away, something deeper than the house itself. Maybe hope. Lisa wasn't home. She'd started taking extra evening shifts. Our daughter was asleep early, in her own room, hugging the teddy bear I'd bought on the only family vacation we ever took. The house was frighteningly quiet then. I turned on the TV not to watch, but just to have some sound fill the void. But even the anchor's voice sounded like a distant echo from another world, one that had nothing to do with me anymore. I put on my coat, went outside, not sure where I was going. The night wind cut through my collar, chilling me to the bone. I drove aimlessly, streetlights streaking across the windshield like meaningless ribbons of light. On the radio, an old song played, the chorus about a man who lost everything except memories nobody needed. I pulled up in front of a small bar on the corner. A neon sign blinked "open" in bright red, reflecting in an old puddle of rainwater by the curb. I couldn't remember the last time I'd stepped into a bar. Maybe never. The air inside was thick with the smell of hard liquor, cigarette smoke, and avoidance. A man sat alone at the corner of the bar, swirling whiskey in his glass, eyes sunken, as if he'd stared too long at something no one else could see. I took a corner booth, ordered a beer. The first glass was ice cold. I held it, put it to my lips, but didn't drink. I just watched the tiny bubbles rise, then heard the chair next to me scrape. A man about 50, hair neatly combed, wearing a black suit jacket, sat down. Without looking at me, he pulled a folder from his pocket and gently slid it across the table towards me. "I hear you're having difficulties," he said, his voice low, unhurried. "Our company needs someone like you. Experienced, doesn't ask questions, works quietly." I opened the folder. An employment contract. Salary double my old job. Commitment to pay off the bank debt within 30 days. "There's one condition," he added, pulling out a pen. "Just sign. And don't ask where the project is going or whose name will be on the design." I looked at the blank space, waiting for a signature. My hand touched the beer glass. I thought of Lisa, my daughter, the house I could lose. I thought of what she'd said. "You should find something. Soon." For the first time in my life, I felt truly shaken. The beer was still cold in my hand. I lifted it, brought it to my mouth, and then I saw it, the small cross dangling from my truck's rearview mirror, reflected in the bar window. The tarnished silver cross my mother gave me for my 18th birthday. I'd taken it down many times, but never thrown it away. I put the glass down, didn't drink. I stood up, said nothing, left the contract, the pen, and the man's puzzled gaze behind me. I drove away. This time I knew exactly where I was going. The church at the end of Maple Street was open all night. No service, no people, just the dim glow of candles and the creak of wood as I pushed open the heavy door. I stepped inside. No one greeted me, but that was okay. I sat down in the third pew, looking up at the simple wooden altar with the large cross hanging above it. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt I had nothing left to lose. I knelt down, didn't ask for anything specific, didn't ask for a job, didn't ask for a miracle. I just said, almost in a whisper, I have nothing left, but if you're still listening, please keep me from losing myself. I didn't expect a voice from heaven, but then I felt a hand gently placed on my shoulder. I looked up. It was Pastor James. He didn't ask anything, didn't need to know what happened. He just said one thing, something I'll never forget. God answers in silence, Daniel. You just have to listen. He told me he had once lost everything too: family, home, reputation. But he kept going, because he believed that those who hold onto their soul when the world loses its way will be led to the right path. I stayed in the church for a long time, I don't know how many hours. When I left, it was nearly dawn. No more wind, no more cold, just a night about to be replaced. I came home, saw Lisa still asleep, her face turned towards the window. I didn't wake her. I just stood there, quietly, feeling whole for the first time in weeks. I didn't have answers. I didn't have a job, but I had found something again, something no one could fire me from: faith. The next morning, I woke just as the sky was lightening. The first light of day crept through the gap in the curtains, painting a pale yellow streak on the living room floor. I sat up, the familiar ache in my back from the old sofa reminding me that last night hadn't been a dream. I had knelt in a quiet church, I hadn't signed the contract, and I was still unemployed. I made coffee, not because I needed to wake up, but because I wanted to hold onto a habit, something left over from my old life. As I took the first sip, the phone rang. I looked at the screen. An unknown number. I knew who was calling, even before I picked up. Have you reconsidered? The man's voice from yesterday came through, without even a hello. Before I could answer, he continued, his voice lower now, like sharing a secret. The bank will send official notice within 3 days. After that, everything goes into the legal process. But if you sign today, I can arrange to put a hold on everything. I looked out the window, saw Lisa's car pulling away from the house. She hadn't said anything when she left. Didn't leave a note like usual either. Just closed the door quietly, then disappeared into the routine I was no longer a part of. I turned back to the phone. I don't know why, but I asked, "Why me?" The man on the other end chuckled softly. "Because you have enough experience not to ask too many questions. And you're desperate enough not to refuse." I hung up. The phone didn't ring again. No threatening texts. No one came knocking. But I felt the whole house closing in on me, as if the four walls themselves were waiting for my answer. I walked down the hall, stopped at my daughter's door. It was slightly ajar. On her desk was a crayon drawing a house with a chimney, an apple tree, and 3 people holding hands. The tallest one in the middle wore a blue shirt and had brown hair. I knew who it was. I went into the bedroom, opened the nightstand drawer, In a small wooden box were a few old items: my employee ID badge, the watch I wore for 10 years, and a piece of paper folded in fourths, a Bible verse my mother had handwritten. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. I refolded the paper, put it in my wallet. Then I called the man back. I didn't ask for more time. I just said, "I refuse." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then the voice turned cold. "Good luck, Mr. Carter. I think you're going to need it." After the call, I left the house. I didn't know what the next step was, but I knew I needed to get out from within those familiar walls, which were slowly becoming a prison for my thoughts. I stopped by a small woodshop on the outskirts of town. Mike had mentioned it once before, a recovery program for unemployed workers and people who'd had run-ins with the law. They didn't ask much. Just, "Do you know how to use tools?" I nodded. The sound of saws, chisels, wood striking wood echoed in the open space. No AC, just slow-moving ceiling fans and wide-open windows, letting the breeze carry the smell of fresh wood mixed with sweat, dust, and something alive. The instructor was an old man with a white beard who didn't ask where I came from or what I used to do. He just handed me a piece of wood, a chisel, and said, "Start here." I wasn't used to it. The first few days, my hands shook holding the chisel. Once, I messed up a whole board. I apologized. The old man just said, "The more you try for perfect, the easier it breaks. Do it again." I did it again, day after day. Each strike of the chisel was a reminder. I still had hands that could create something. In the evenings, I came home later, not to avoid anyone, but because I was starting to feel alive again. Lisa didn't ask where I'd been. She just looked at me when I walked in, then turned away, and I no longer felt the need to explain. Because if there was anything worth talking about, it was what I was doing and not what I was looking for. A week later, the old man gave me a simple wooden pew frame. "Assemble this," he said, "for the church." I took it to the church on Maple Street, along with a small plaque I carved, "Gifted by someone who never gave up." Pastor James looked at me, just smiled. He didn't say anything. I didn't need to hear anything either. We both understood faith isn't always about sermons or prayers. Sometimes, it's just a man facing temptation and saying, "No." That evening, I sat alone in the workshop after hours, the yellow light shining down on an empty wooden table. I looked at my hands, calloused, scratched, still smelling of wood, and I smiled. Not because everything was okay, but because I hadn't betrayed the only thing I had left inside me. A year after I left the old company, I still didn't have anything flashy to report. No new car, no big house, no achievements written up in the papers. But every morning I woke up to the sound of saws from the woodshop, and every night I went to sleep with the smell of wood on my hands. Nobody called me boss, but here people believed in me. City winters have a coldness that isn't just about temperature, but something in the air. Dry leaves crunched under my feet as I biked away from the workshop just after 7. It was already dark, streetlights casting amber pools of light on the empty street, making my shadow stretch out long, like someone else quietly walking beside me. I had just gotten home when my phone vibrated. It was Mike. I stood under the porch eaves, not yet inside, so I could hear better. The wind whipped at the back of my neck like a warning from winter itself. Mike's voice came over the line, low, strained, as if he didn't want anyone nearby to overhear. "They said your name this morning in the meeting, not to honor you, but to beg." I was silent. Mike sighed. Colin screwed up a major contract, ignored warnings from the engineering department, tried to rush the schedule. Foundations unstable. Part of the structure collapsed. $10 million gone in an afternoon. I still didn't say anything. Mike continued, slower. The client is demanding you handle it personally if they want any chance of keeping the contract. The boss wants to see you. They'll offer whatever conditions you want. I hung up, went inside, turned on the kitchen light. The kitchen was cold and quiet as always. Lisa wasn't home yet. My daughter was asleep early. I opened the cupboard, poured a glass of water, drank it in slow sips. Each swallow brought back memories. 17 years of dedication, then being discarded like an expired item. I remembered the day I walked out of the company, cardboard box in hand. Remembered Colin's half-smirk. Remembered the way the boss looked at me, like I was a burden finally lifted. And now those same faces were turning back, knocking on my door. The next morning I went, not because I needed the job, but because I needed to witness what happens when justice comes late. But still comes. The office hadn't changed. Still the big glass doors, still the blinding white lights, still the gray carpeted hallway I'd walked down so many times with blueprints in hand. But this time I brought nothing with me, just bare hands and a calm heart. Mike waited for me by the elevator. He didn't need to say anything. His nod was enough to know. Today wasn't like other days. The sixth-floor conference room smelled of old coffee and anxiety. The boss sat at the head of the table. Colin stood behind him, face pale, lips pressed tight as if trying to swallow an apology no one had taught him how to say. I pulled out a chair, sat down. The boss started with a long, rambling speech. I didn't pay much attention. Every sentence he spoke only made me realize one thing. He didn't remember why he once needed me. Only remembered I was the one who could save things when they fell apart. Finally, he stopped, looked directly at me with a hint of humility for the first time. Daniel, if you agree to come back, this contract still has a chance. We trust your experience, and we're prepared to negotiate any terms. I didn't answer right away. I looked at Colin. He lowered his gaze. No trace of the confident smile from a year ago. His hands were clenched tight, just like I remembered seeing them the day I left. I took a breath, then spoke. My voice as calm as if telling an old story. I'm no longer someone you can just call whenever you need. No one spoke. I continued, each word pressing on memories they had forgotten. 17 years, I asked for nothing. I just worked well, worked right. I didn't ask for praise, didn't ask for promotions. I just needed to be treated like a human being. And you forgot that. The boss stammered something, maybe an apology. I didn't catch it. I didn't need to. I stood up, said my final words. You chose someone else. Now live with that choice. I walked out into the hallway. Mike followed. Are you sure? He asked, genuine concern in his eyes. I smiled, looked at him, and for the first time in years, said something that surprised even myself with its lightness. You know, Mike, forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the same place. Sometimes forgiveness is walking away without carrying the bitterness anymore. He nodded, said nothing more. I left the building, the afternoon sun warm on my cheek, like a gentle farewell. I didn't feel regret, didn't feel anger, just felt empty, but a healthy kind of empty, like a room after it's been cleaned out, ready for something new. That evening, I went back to the woodshop. The students were still working on their projects, the rhythmic sound of woodworking like a steady heartbeat. I passed Emma, the young woman who almost gave up due to shame over her past, carefully sanding a tabletop. She looked up at me. Where'd you go? I replied, just visited an old place, to make sure I don't belong there anymore. Emma smiled, then bent back over her work. I stood there a while, watching rough pieces of wood being shaped, and saw something I hadn't seen clearly during 17 years in that office. Value isn't about who recognizes you. but about where you choose to stand when everything around you collapses. And I had chosen, quietly, clearly, with honor. Every morning, I walk into the woodshop through a small side door behind the church. The door is old, its hinges creak when it opens, and there's always the faint smell of wood stain mixed with fine dust in the air. But to me, that sound is my morning greeting, simple, honest, asking nothing. There's nothing special about this workshop. Just a simple building with a corrugated metal roof, temporary yellow lights, a few rough wooden tables, and a bunch of tools hanging on the wall, rusted with time. But here, nobody calls each other by titles. Nobody asks what school you graduated from. We only care about one thing. Are you ready to start over? I started over from the very first strike of the chisel. First, I just came to keep my hands busy. But gradually I stayed, because people needed me, not for my reputation, but because I knew how to make a stubborn piece of wood useful. And sometimes, a simple skill can save a person from feeling like they're scrap. Emma was one of those people. A young woman, maybe 21, with black hair cut shoulder length, eyes always downcast when someone asked her something. She didn't talk much about her past, just put rehabilitated on her application. I didn't ask more. Here, the past wasn't as important as how you held a wood plane. The first day, she bumped hard against a table edge, sending a whole tray of tools clattering to the cement floor. The metallic clang echoed sharply. She scrambled to pick them up, hands shaking so badly she couldn't grip the hammer. Others stared. A few whispers. She flushed red, turned away, about to leave. I walked over, didn't say anything, just handed her a square piece of wood. This was the first piece I carved. I dropped things too, shook just like you, but then I picked it up again. Because I knew, if you don't learn to control your own hands, your past will always control you. She didn't answer, but the next day she came back. And so it went day by day. I taught her how to tell soft wood from hard, how to adjust a plain blade, how not to push too hard when trimming an edge, because wood, like people, will crack if you force it too much. Emma started to gain confidence. She gradually began to lift her head when she spoke. A few times, I saw her helping other students, gently, patiently, like I had done with her. But it wasn't always smooth sailing. One afternoon, the sky was gray, a light drizzle falling outside the window. Emma suddenly stopped mid-task. She stared at the unfinished chair, then abruptly swept everything off her table, her voice almost snapping. I can't do this. I'm not like everyone else here. I'm a thief, a dropout. I don't deserve to learn how to make these things. The whole workshop went quiet. I walked over, didn't yell, didn't lecture. I just pulled over an unfinished wooden chair. See this leg? It was cut wrong. Someone else threw it out. But I kept it, sanded it, recut it. Now it stands. Not perfect, but sturdy. Because value isn't about being cut wrong. It's about whether you're willing to be reworked. Emma lowered her head, tears falling silently. That evening, she stayed 2 extra hours to finish the chair. She named it Second Chance. 3 weeks later, she donated it to the church. When I was cleaning up, I found a small card tucked under the chair leg, handwritten in shaky script. Thank you, Daniel. You didn't just teach me woodworking. You taught me to believe I wasn't the old me anymore. I've kept that card ever since. Didn't hang it up, didn't show it to anyone. Just put it in the drawer, next to the silver cross my mother gave me. The only 2 things I held on to when my old life fell apart. Sometimes Mike stops by. When he has time, he watches the kids playing wood, sometimes cracking a joke to make Emma laugh. One afternoon, he looked at me, then said, You know, they hired an outside team to fix the project Colin messed up. Cost 3 times the original estimate. Colin quit, went back home. I didn't ask for details. Mike looked at Emma, then back at me. "You're still changing lives, Daniel. Just in God's way." I didn't reply. I just watched Emma, carefully polishing a tabletop, her face focused, her eyes no longer avoiding contact. In the evenings, when everyone else has gone home, I often stay behind, alone, looking around the workshop with its paint splatters on the walls, the smell of burnt wood from mistakes made. But here I feel useful. No applause needed. No praise required. Lisa sent me a letter. She left it in the mailbox out front. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting. She wrote, "I blamed you too much. Now I understand. Living for reputation is easier than living right. I don't know if we still have a chance, but I hope our daughter grows up more like you than like me." I didn't reply, not out of anger, but because I understood some apologies just need to be read in silence. And sometimes, forgiveness doesn't come from a response, but from how we continue to live after the hurt. The morning air was unusually clear that day, cool, with a gentle breeze rustling the willow branches in front of the churchyard, making a sound like the earth sighing. I arrived earlier than usual, holding a small cloth-wrapped box, walking slowly along the old brick path. Each step felt light, but inside, my heart beat like a knock on a door unanswered for years. Today was Emma's wedding. The small girl who once trembled holding a chisel now stood tall in the church, wearing a simple white dress, her eyes bright, lips pressed together with emotion. The groom was a gentle young man I'd only met a few times, unassuming, but he held Emma's hand very tightly, as if making vows with his actions instead of words. The church was fuller than usual. Pews packed, the low murmur of conversation, soft laughter mixed with the sound of the piano playing the prelude. I sat in the second row, still holding the cloth-wrapped box. It was small, fit neatly in my palm, but inside was something I'd kept for so many years, a wedding ring. I took it off after that last night on the sofa, during the winter last year. The night Lisa said she no longer called me husband. I didn't throw it away, didn't sell it. I just folded it away, like folding up an unfinished promise. And now I was about to give it away, not to forget, but so someone else could begin. When Pastor James invited loved ones to speak, I didn't stand up right away. I hesitated. Then Emma looked at me, her eyes glistening, and nodded slightly. That one nod was enough to make me walk up. I held the microphone with both hands, then looked around. My voice wasn't loud, but clear enough for everyone to hear. I don't have many words about love. I don't have a perfect marriage story to tell either. But I have something that was once a symbol of hope. I opened the box, took out the wedding ring. It wasn't shiny anymore. Small scratches, like the footprints of memory, marked its surface. But to me, each mark represented a time I had tried to keep a promise. I kept this ring, even when the person who walked down the aisle with me was no longer beside me. I kept it not because I still had hope, but because I needed to believe that a promise, even with no one left to hear it, should be kept until the very end. I stepped forward, offered the ring to Emma. "Now I give it to you, not for you to remember a broken marriage, but for you to start with a belief that even if the world turns its back, two people holding hands can still walk forward." Emma didn't say anything. She just took the ring with both hands, then hugged me tightly. It wasn't the hug of a student for a teacher. It felt like a lost child who had found the person waiting with a lamp at the end of the street. After the ceremony, everyone gathered in the churchyard, laughter ringing out, blessings flowing freely. I stood in a corner, watching Emma talk with guests, her hand intertwined with her husband's, the old ring now resting between two new palms. Mike came over, handed me an iced tea. Not gonna cry, are ya? He joked. I chuckled softly. No, but if I did, it wouldn't be from sadness. We sat down on the wooden bench Emma herself had made for the church. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting our shadows on the ground like two older, lighter figures. I told Mike about Lisa's letter, that she hadn't said she'd come back, hadn't asked for forgiveness either, just said she hoped our daughter would grow up like me, living for what's right, not what's easy. Mike nodded, saying nothing. We sat in silence for a while, just the sound of the wind, rustling leaves, and the faint clinking of spoons in paper cups from the reception nearby. Then Mike asked me a question perhaps many had forgotten. Do you still believe in God? I didn't answer right away. I looked up at the church steeple, where the last rays of sunlight painted a brilliant line on the faded red bricks. Finally, I replied, I'm not sure he always answers quickly, but I believe he always listens. Mike smiled, clapped me on the shoulder. I got home just as the sun had completely set. The house was quiet as always, but I didn't feel lonely. I opened the drawer, looked at the empty space where the ring used to be. Empty, but not cold. Empty, but not loss. Simply time for my hand to be lighter so someone else could start a new journey. I stepped out onto the porch, sat on the step, tilted my face up to the sky. Stars were beginning to appear, twinkling but quiet. I folded my hands, didn't ask for anything, just whispered a sentence. I've passed on the promise, Lord. I'm not keeping it just for myself anymore.